This is a Bernardelli P018S. It's pretty obscure, you've probably never heard of it. Thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Hipster Ian McCollum, and yes, today is the Bernardelli P018S. Bernardelli, if you haven't heard of them, which you probably haven't, is another very long-lived Italian firearms company located in the Val Tromp around Brescia. This is the same location that most of the predominant Italian firearms manufacturers are located. It's an area that's been into industrial manufacturing and specifically firearms for literally half a millennia. Beretta is located there. They trace their roots back to the 1500s. Bernardelli can actually trace its roots back to the mid-1600s and its specific name to the 1700s. So they've been making guns and gun-related stuff for a while. The stuff that you might recognize, well, in the 1920s and 30s, they got into making Bodeo revolvers, 1889 Bodeos, for the Italian military, one of several manufacturers to do that. So, yeah, that's cool, that's a thing. After World War II, they got a bit more into commercial civilian handguns. They did a lot of smaller pocket pistols, stuff that never really got that much traction here in the US. I have a couple videos on other Bernardelli models that you also probably haven't heard of. But anyway, I'll link to at least one of those at the end of this one if you're interested in it. But in 1982, they released the P018, which was their attempt at a military and police service pistol. So it is a Browning tilting barrel style of gun. It's well made. It's kind of the typical 1980s standard military gun. Steel frame, double stack magazine, so a 15 round capacity, chambered for 9mm parabellum, DASA, like, you can carry it cocked and locked, or you can decock it. Kind of sounds like the Beretta, right? There's some alternative history somewhere where this got adopted by the US Army instead of the Beretta 92, and it became tremendously successful, and everyone wonders why Beretta did that weird thing with the P38 locking system. Anyway, let's take a closer look at this, and I will show you how it's not quite the same as everything else, but basically the same as everything else. I really think the lines on this are elegant and good looking. Not everyone does, but I think it's a pretty well done pistol. We have an exposed hammer for controls. Everything is right-handed. This is before all of this sort of gun, before, you know, the standard gun needed to have ambidextrous controls. So magazine release there. We have a 15-round double stack magazine. If you are trying to find magazines for your Bernardelli, these are distinctively marked with this VB, Vincenzo Bernardelli, marking on the back of the mag, so they're easy to spot. They did also offer these pistols in 7.65 parabellum, which is cool, as well as 9mm parabellum like this one, and 9x21mm for the commercial Italian market, where 9 parabellum was a military cartridge and heavily restricted. Moving on, we have a manual safety lever there, so I can cock the hammer, lift the safety up, locks the trigger. You can carry it that way, or you can actually push the lever farther up and it will act as a decocker. You would then snap it down, and now it is in double action. Note that there is a safety notch there, so if I have the hammer all the way down and start to pull in double action, click right there, I have brought it to the half cock notch, safety notch, to prevent any unintentional discharge if it's dropped. The sights are windage adjustable. We've got a painted white front dot there and 2 white dots there on the back of a U-notch. Pretty typical, you know, service pistol stuff. Taking a look at the markings here, we have V Bernardelli in Gardone Val Tromp, made in Italy. Caliber on this one is 9 parabellum. Right there we have our model designation, P018S. The S comes slightly after the regular P018. We'll get to that in a minute. Markings on the barrel, importer, Italian proof marks. Serial number, all of these appear to be in the 300,000 serial number range, and not more than a couple thousand of these were made total in all different patterns. This is the full length one. Barrel is 4.88 inches. They did also have a compact pattern that they released that had a 4.08 inch barrel, so a little bit shorter. To disassemble this is a little bit different than normal. Normally you'd expect to lock the slide all the way back and then pull the cross pin. For this guy, what we're going to do is actually lock it back just that far, and you can push the safety lever up into the disassembly position there, and then I just push out this cross pin. There we go. As soon as it comes out, that's going to drop forward. I can then pull the slide off, and I have slide and frame. We have some pretty typical stuff going on up here. This is an improvement on the 1911 in that it has a cam track cut in a solid, basically lug under the barrel, instead of having a 1911 style swinging link. This is a little more high power-ish style. Now, for modern pistols, we've moved on to basically always using the top of the ejection port shroud as the locking surface. This is one generation back from that, where there are still locking lugs cut into the barrel itself and locking recesses in the top of the slide. But fundamentally, it's a Browning style system. The barrel, it's short recoil, barrel tips down. Non-captive recoil spring there, spring guide. We have a firing pin safety, so if this plug isn't pressed upward when the gun's assembled, you can't actually push the firing pin forward. And then here in the trigger mechanism, there is a little protrusion right there. When I pull the trigger, that's going to lift up, and that is what depresses the safety and allows it to fire. So the firing pin can't go forward unless the trigger has actually been pulled backwards. Next up, I'm going to pull this grip panel off. Being properly hipster, they have actually included a little tiny lock washer with the grip screw, so an extra piece for you to lose. And then the grips don't just sit flat on the gun, they actually have a little lip in the front. So you don't put the grip on flat, you actually have to leverage it in like that. All right, there we go. In at the front and then lay it down. Notice we have the same Bernardelli logo on the grip panels. And then back here, we have our whole fire control mechanism. So you have an external trigger bar here, which is mostly covered by the grip panels. If we look up inside, you can see this is the hammer right there, and it's going to catch on the sear right there, click. When I pull the trigger, this is just going to pull the sear. It's going to pull the trigger bar forward, which pulls the sear forward, disconnecting it from the hammer and allowing the hammer to drop. And then when it resets, this bar grabs onto the hammer itself to pull it back for double action. So not the simplest thing, not quite like everything else. We do have a coil mainspring, so we're a little better than the original 1911 design with its multi-part flat springs. But that's pretty much all you've got there. Full-length rails, steel frame. It is a really quite nicely made gun. The build construction quality is excellent, and I really can't find anything bad to say about these. In fact, this thing is even built like a proper little skinny jeans hipster. If we compare it to its better-known brethren, the Beretta M9, which actually has no similarities to it other than the caliber, the date, and the country of origin, you can see that these are basically the same overall size pistol, but the Bernardelli is substantially thinner, and you can feel it when you're holding the gun. Like the grip of the Bernardelli is much more comfortable, at least to me, than the rather chunky grip of the Beretta 92. Kind of a little disappointing, actually. You can't really tell so much. It doesn't seem like you can tell so much here on camera looking at those front grips, but it is remarkable how much more comfortable this is than that big chunky Beretta. Now, Bernardelli would actually have a series of pistols based on this system, and this isn't the first of them. The original was the P018, which did not have a decocker, had a few subtle differences. It had wraparound wood grips, had a little bit of a shorter safety lever. That was replaced by the P018S with its steel backstrap and plastic grip panels, a little bit longer safety that also functions as a decocker. This was released on the export market. Never was particularly popular. After this, they would transition to the P1 model, always spelled out O-N-E. They had a couple versions of that. They introduced it in .40 Smith & Wesson. They had the VB Practical, which was a P1 tricked out for IPSC competition shooting with a compensator and extended magazines and lots of extra cool frilly bits. Those are extremely rare. I don't think they were ever imported into the US, but there are a few of them around Italy, and there are a couple that have wandered into the country here through various means. But none of these guns would ultimately be particularly successful. We have a small batch that were imported, actually a couple batches imported by different people. A few police agencies, security agencies did purchase these worldwide, but not enough to sustain them. Eventually, Bernardelli would be sold to the Turkish Sarsılmaz, if I'm pronouncing that right, company in the late 90s. In the 1990s, these all go out of production and they're ultimately unsuccessful. But they are still really nice pistols. Like, they don't do anything fundamentally wrong, they just didn't catch on. They weren't quite at the right place at the right time. They have a bit of a reputation for being a little fragile today. How much of that is deserved, I'm really not sure. I'm sure some of it is amplified by the fact that there's basically no parts availability for the parts that do break, so people are probably more concerned about them being fragile than if they were something that had regular support still available. So, now, I do happen to have 3 magazines for this one, so this coming weekend, I figured I'm going to go ahead and do a 2-gun match with oddball Italian guns. And this will be the pistol, and you'll see the rifle in a couple days, so stay tuned for that. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.